Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome back. So, in our last lecture we were discussing some preliminary about monopoly market, right? What is called monopoly market or what are its feature and all, right? So, we will discuss today a profit maximizing producers optimum output choice, optimum or profit maximizing quantity choice of output. Okay. So, that we will discuss. So, do not forget that we are discussing all these alternative markets, right, under the ceteris paribus condition, more specifically that we are taking the cost structure of the producer. Okay. Entire cost structure means whatever technology he is using, kind of factor markets he is facing, okay, all those are under the ceteris paribus kind of thing. So, those we are not changing at all, only what we are changing. In the last lecture we discussed about competitive market. So, competitive product market. So, a producer, I have certain cost structure, okay. With that cost structure, if I operate in a competitive product market, what will be my optimum production decision? Alternatively, if I operate in a product market which is monopoly kind of thing, what will be my optimum product decision? Alternatively, if I operate in a say monopolistically competitive kind of product market, what will be my optimum decision, and so on. So, every time we are taking the cost structure as if it is given. Okay. So, actually certain other types of markets are there like called monopsony. It is just the opposite of monopoly. Monopoly is the single sellers market, monopsony is the single buyers market. Bilateral monopoly means in a market bilateral, both way monopoly kind of thing, a market where only single seller is there as well as only single buyer is there. Okay. So, this kind of market, monopsony, bilateral monopoly, these kinds of markets we will not discuss exclusively or exhaustively in this course, but in this course, so 4 different markets we are discussing in details, 4 different markets in the sense that a producer who is going to operate this 4 type, any of these 4 type of product market, what will be his or her optimum production decision or optimum quantity choice in that sense. What are those 4 different types of markets? One is perfectly competitive, which we have already discussed, okay. Then monopoly, we are going to discuss today, monopolistically competitive, and oligopoly. These 4 different types of markets we will discuss. Okay. So, perfectly competitive market discussion we have already finished, monopoly we are going to discuss today, and monopolistically competitive and oligopoly market we will discuss sometimes later. Okay. So, how these 4 different types of markets we can, or which market will be called what type of market. So, basically how will depend. So, first you ask, okay, how many sellers are there in the market. Okay. So, first question is how many producers or how many sellers. Okay. If answer is say 1, it is called monopoly. If answer is say few, here 1. How many sellers are there in the market? 1 seller is there. Okay. So, then market will be called monopoly. Answer is few number of sellers are there, 5, 6, 2, 3 like that. Okay. So, when answer is few, it will be called oligopoly. If the answer is alternative 3 alternative answer can be there, only 1 seller, few sellers, many sellers. If answer is many, then you are posing another question. Here another question. What is that? What is that product type? Okay. Product type means whether the many sellers are there in the market? No, all those sellers are selling the identical product or not, homogeneous product or not. If answer is yes, or product is homogeneous product or identical product, homogeneous, we can tell identical also, identical product, then it will be called perfectly competitive. Perfectly competitive, I am telling PC, perfectly competitive. And if the product type is differentiated, then it will be called monopolistically competitive. So, perfectly competitive we can tell PC, monopoly is simply M, monopolistically competitive is MC, and oligopoly is O. Okay. So, in this particular case this is M, this particular case this is O, this particular case PC, this particular case it is MC, monopolistically competitive. So, product is differentiated, we will discuss monopolistically competitive market, where when we introduced monopoly, you understand, or if you can remember in the last lecture, we told that only single seller is there. Not only that, the product what that seller is selling in the market, there is no close substitute available. Okay. So, single product. Okay. Here product is differentiated. When the market is monopolistically competitive kind, product is differentiated means sellers are selling different product, but those products are very close substitute to each other, like say bath soap market, right. Bath soap market, Indian bath soap market, if you see, no, lot of varieties of bath soaps are available, right, say Pierce, Lux, Lifebuoy, Vivel, okay, so many, Dove, Park Avenue, so many different varieties of, all are bath soap only. Okay. So, that kind of markets are called monopolistically competitive market. Okay. Other features of those detailed feature of those kinds of market, monopolistically competitive market, oligopoly market, we will discuss one by one. So, let us today discuss what will be the equilibrium of a producer who is operating in a monopoly kind of product market. Okay. Okay. So, of course, we are taking that producer's cost structure as given. So, kind of cost curves we have taken for the competitive market, okay, same type of cost structure or cost curves we will take, right. Say suppose, say if it is a short run case, right, say suppose this is average total cost curve is there, ATC, okay, ATC, suppose say this is average variable cost curve is there, and this is MC, marginal cost curve is there. Okay. Of course, we are measuring quantity in the horizontal axis, and price, all types of revenues, all types of cost, whatever we will measure all in the vertical axis, and as many variables we are measuring in the vertical axis, that many different curves will come within this panel. Okay. Now, the question is, so cost structure is given, and my profit, that monopoly producer, his profit depends on revenue minus cost, right. So, cost structure we know. What is the revenue structure? So, if I produce 2 units of output, 3 units of output, 5 units of output, right, I have to know whether a demand for my product is there in the market, right. So, that demand curve, okay, will tell me that if I produce and I sell, okay, in the market, what kind of price I will get. Demand curve is basically a price line, no, if you can understand or remember, we are measuring quantity this side and price that side, okay, and demand curve, suppose this kind of downward sloping demand curve we are getting. That means what? This kind of demand curve, if we know that this kind of demand curve is there for my product in the market, or customers willingness to buy, purchase my product, that is reflected by this kind of demand curve. So, it is indirectly telling to me that if I want to produce this much, I can set this much price for my product of the each unit of my product. If I want to sell this many of product, right, perhaps I have to set this much of price per unit of the commodity, and so on, right. So, that demand curve is indirectly reflecting what kind of price I will get depending on my quantity decision, how much quantity I am producing and I am trying to sell that or willing to sell that in the market, right. So, we have to first know what is the demand curve for my product, or for that monopoly type of producer who is there, his product in the market. Okay. So, in competitive market, if you can understand, a single producer who is operating in a competitive kind of product market, demand curve for his product, okay, it is horizontal, what we have discussed, okay, this kind of demand curve was there, okay, in a competitive market. But in the monopoly market, what kind of demand curve will be there? Okay. Monopoly market, actually demand curve will be downward sloping. Say suppose this is the demand curve, this is the demand curve, AD is the demand curve. Okay. Now, the question is, in monopoly market, why the demand curve will be AD or this kind of downward sloping? For the ease of our understanding, let us assume that it is downward sloping straight line, okay, straight line. Okay. But the discussion, it does not require that our demand curve should be straight line. We are taking that straight line for ease of our understanding. Okay. So, AD type of downward sloping. The first question is, why in a monopoly market demand curve will be straight line? For I am a producer, okay, for demand for my product, okay, which is reflected by the demand curve, why that will be downward sloping? Look, I am a monopoly producer, right? So, I am the only seller in that market. That means whatever the market demand curve is there, that is the demand curve for me also, because other than me no other seller is there for that product in the market, right. So, whatever the entire market demand curve is there, that is my demand curve. Okay. If you can remember, in the competitive market, we told that price is determined by the demand supply force in the entire market, and none of the single seller or buyer have any control over market price, okay, and market price is determined by demand supply force. This is the market price prevailing in that market, and everybody is a price taker there, right, that we told. But here this was the market demand curve, that same market demand curve is the demand curve for me, because I am the single seller of that product and nobody else is there in that market to sell that same product. Okay. So, actually demand curve, so I hope you understood that demand curve will be downward sloping here, because the entire market demand curve is that single producer's demand curve who is operating, since the market is a monopoly kind of market. So, this is the demand curve, right. So, what is the profit maximizing? So, if we want to maximize his profit, taking his quantity, choice of the output quantity. So, quantity variable, output quantity is the choice variable here, right. We know that first order profit maximizing condition is MR equals to MC, okay, and second order condition is slope of MR should be less than slope of MC, that we know, right, slope of MC, right. So, first we have to know that what is his marginal revenue line. Okay. If we know that marginal revenue line, exactly, if you can remember, in the competitive market, we have some marginal revenue line, this kind of marginal cost curve we have. So, we are looking at where these two conditions are satisfied, MR equals to MC and slope of MR is less than slope of MC. Okay. That point we are telling that is the equilibrium point. Okay. And that point corresponding to the quantity axis, that was the equilibrium quantity that producer should produce. Equilibrium means profit maximizing quantity, that kind of answer we got. Exactly that way, if we have here what is the marginal revenue line, so we can draw that marginal revenue curve, and then using that marginal revenue curve and marginal cost curve, these two conditions we can validate, accordingly we can decide, right. Look, here our choice variable is the quantity, output quantity, how much that producer is going to, producer is deciding how much quantity I will produce. Okay. Okay. So, if the demand curve is this, demand curve is basically price line, right. This price line, this, look at here, this demand curve, we are measuring price in the vertical axis and horizontal in the axis we are measuring quantity, right. So, basically we are measuring price, the way we are writing here the demand curve as if price equals to some function of quantity, right, in that way. And since we are taking the demand curve to be linear downward sloping, right, usual downward sloping demand curve, but it is a linear thing, I can tell it is explicit form, this is implicit form. Okay. It is explicit form something A minus B Q kind of thing, where this OA, this distance is basically small a, okay, and slope of this AD line is basically minus B, right. So, OA, this is equals to A, and slope of AD line, AD curve is equals to minus B. Then this is the equation of my demand curve. Okay. If this is the case, what will be the total revenue of that producer? Total revenue is basically price into quantity. So, this is the price. So, it will be A minus BQ, that is the price into quantity, right. So, that we can tell that will be AQ minus BQ square. Okay. If that is the case, what will be marginal revenue? Marginal revenue by definition we know del total revenue del Q. Okay. Due to change in your quantity, how much or how your total revenue will change, that is the definition of marginal revenue. So, if you take that derivative with respect to quantity of this equation, because this is the total revenue, you will get that it will be A minus twice BQ. So, if we have a linear demand curve downward sloping usual whose equation is A minus BQ, we will have the MR line marginal revenue curve, that is also will be straight line, that will also have the same vertical intercept like demand curve, but its slope will be the double, negative double, and demand curve slope was minus B, marginal revenue curve slope is minus twice B. Okay. So, definitely this kind of line we will get marginal revenue line. Okay. Same vertical intercept, demand curve and marginal revenue curve are originating from the vertical axis the same point. Okay. And marginal revenue curve will be having a double slope. Okay. Absolute slope in absolute number, it is double than the slope of the demand curve. Okay. When this demand curve is a straight line. Okay. And what is the implication of slope is double? In this way, for every possible price, whatever we can think of, right, this distance is basically half of this distance. This distance is half of this distance. So, everywhere red color distance, red color second bracketed term distance is half of the green color second bracketed distance. Okay. That is the meaning of that is the implication of the slope of the double, right. That you can easily do, no. Slope of this curve means this by this, right, and slope of this curve is basically this by this with of course a negative sign, both of them are downward sloping, right, with a negative sign, right. So, you can easily understand that if this curve's slope is double of this curve, right, definitely this distance will be half of this distance, and so on for all possible price in this side, all possible price, whatever price we can think of, all possible price, this distance will be exactly half of that distance. Okay. So, now the task is easy, we know what is the marginal revenue curve, we know what is the demand curve, and all the cost curves are there, right. So, let us draw the diagram afresh. So, we know, so suppose this is the average total cost curve ATC line, as usual, of course, we are measuring quantity here, price, revenues, cost, all we are measuring in the vertical axis, right. This is the origin. Okay. Say suppose this is the average variable cost line, it is a short run we are talking about, this is the marginal cost line, right. Suppose this is the demand curve AD, okay, and say this is the MR line. Okay. So, definitely let me draw MR line a little bit differently. Okay, and suppose this is the MR line. Okay. So, MR equals to MC, the first order condition, and second order condition is slope of the MR should be smaller than the slope of MC line. So, where is that? Both the conditions are satisfied here. Because this is the MC line, right. So, MR and MC, so both the conditions are satisfied here, MR equals to MC, and here the slope of MR is negative and slope of MC is either positive or maybe 0 like that, okay, because it looks like this is the lowest point, then it is the positive. Okay. So, definitely both the conditions of profit maximization are satisfied, right. So, this since this is the equilibrium point, what is the implication of that equilibrium point? It is telling that this much output quantity that monopoly producer should produce, this much, say suppose this is denoted by OQ star. Okay. Why we are taking first output quantity? Because look at here, that profit maximizing equation, no, what was our choice variable? Our choice variable was the quantity. So, use whatever through that process, taking quantity as the choice variable. Okay. Whatever two conditions we are reaching, MR equals to MC and the second order condition where you are reaching, those conditions if we satisfy, those will give you the optimum value of the choice variable first. So, that is giving you the, this is the choice variable. Okay. So, choice variable's optimum quantity is Q star, it is given. Now, so this is telling that to maximize his profit, that producer who is facing this kind of cost structure is given by these three cost curves, he should produce this much of quantity of that product. Now, that producer is asking himself, if I want to produce or I want to sell this much of quantity of output to that market, right, what price I can set? Here, since the producer is a sole tiger in the market, he is the only seller of that product in the market, right, he is a price maker here. Unlike the competitive market, everybody was price taker, here he is a price maker. He will decide how much price he will set for his product. Okay. So, first we are getting, let me repeat again, first we are getting what is the optimum value of the quantity. Okay. Now, that is telling that, okay, suppose this OQ star amount is 100. So, it is telling that you should produce 100 units of output. Now, I am asking myself, yes, I will produce 100 units of output. By producing 100 units of output, I can maximize my profit. But how much price I should set for my product? Price means for each unit of my product. Okay. So, that it is guaranteed that all my 100 units whatever I produce, that will be sold in the market. So, definitely if we extend this line vertically, if we go, of course, if we set this price, that is guaranteeing that all of his product will be sold in the market, because this many customers are there in the market whose maximum willingness to pay for this product is either this price or more than that. Look, the demand curve, this demand curve has this segment, okay, where the people who are the customer, potential customers, their maximum willingness to pay is either this distance, this much price or more than that. So, out of those this much or more than that, he is choosing the lowest amount of those things. So, this is the lowest amount of the price. So, he is asking himself that what price I should set for my product, for each unit of my product, and that answer is that if I set this price for each unit of my product, that will be guaranteeing that all my products will be sold in the market. Okay. So, obviously, he will set this price, okay, and he will find enough number of customers for his product, whatever, say 100 units or OQ star units in general, whatever he is producing. Okay. So, that is the thing, and as a result, let me draw this diagram afresh. Okay. Okay. ATC line, ATC line, average total cost line, AVC, MC, demand curve AD and MR line. Okay. So, MR equals to MC, this is MC, this is MR. So, this point. Okay. So, first thing O, this is Q star. So, OQ star amount of output he should produce, and he should set OP star this much price for each unit of his output. Okay. So, now if we ask how much profit that producer will get, of course, it is very easy, because this is the price per unit. So, this larger box, okay, suppose this point is say P. Okay. So, P star P Q star O, this rectangular area is his total revenue, right, because this much quantity into that much price, that is the total revenue. Okay. What is his total cost? Total cost is basically, look at here, if he produce OQ star amount of output per unit of the product, what total cost or what average total cost he is facing? This is his average total cost line. So, say suppose this is M and this is N. So, M N Q star O, that is his total cost. Okay. So, definitely this blue shaded rectangular area representing his profit, that is his profit. Okay, and that is his maximum amount of profit. Now, we will try to understand, we will prove now that this point, this P point is basically always, this P point will always lie on the elastic segment of his demand curve. This is the demand curve, no, AD is the demand curve. See, by looking at, if you extend this demand curve, no, wherever it will hit the horizontal axis, right, you can easily understand that this point is left hand side of the midpoint of this demand curve, right. So, we are getting from the diagram as an impression that it is always in the elastic. If you can remember, this is the, if this is the midpoint of the demand curve, this side is the that portion of the demand curve where elasticity of demand, price elasticity of demand is always less than 1. At this point it is 1, and at this segment any point it is greater than 1. Okay. Lower portion by the upper portion, if you can remember, elastic, of course with a negative sign, minus, at this point elasticity value is minus 1. Okay. So, that is the thing. So, this region, this segment we can tell the elastic segment of his demand curve, right. So, we are getting an impression that monopoly's equilibrium will perhaps fall on the elastic segment of his demand curve. Okay. Let us prove that, why that will be true. Okay. So, profit maximizing condition, first order condition is basically MR equals to MC, right. In the competitive market, MR was exactly equals to price, right, because price was independent of quantity, right, because you are price taker and what is the existing price was there in the market, you can produce as many you want. Okay. Everything will be sold of your product at that price level, right. But here price is a function of quantity, right, because look at here, your price line or the demand curve is downward sloping. Different quantity, if you produce this much of quantity, you can set that much of price per unit quantity. If you produce this much of quantity, you can set that much price per unit of quantity. This much quantity you can set that much price per unit of quantity, and so on. Why you can set different price? Because otherwise your product will not be sold, all of your product will not be sold, maybe some will be unsold. Okay. That is the thing. So, essentially price is a function of the quantity, and that is why when we this kind of implicit form, when we explicitly wrote, we told A minus BQ kind of thing, explicit form, right. Okay. So, in this particular case, MR is what? MR we have done. So, MR equals to MC. So, MC was there, okay, and MR was basically price as a function of quantity into quantity, that is the total revenue, right. So, MR must be del Q of that thing. Okay. MR equals to MC condition is telling. So, this will tell right hand side will be your MC. If you take derivative of this component in general, okay, when we do not know that this kind of explicit form is there, right, in general implicit form P as a function of Q, if it is there, if you take the derivative with respect to Q, what you will get? It will be price itself, because price into del Q that component, plus Q into del Q, that is equals to MC. So, MR, if I take say price common, okay, so it will be 1 plus Q by P into del Q, left hand side, okay, and right hand side equals to MC, right, that will be equals to MC, that is your condition. So, left hand side this equation I can write price whole into 1 upon elasticity. Look at here, elasticity of demand, price elasticity of demand is what? It is basically by definition elasticity of demand, own price elasticity of demand, okay, is basically del Q del P into P by Q. If you can remember, we have discussed that earlier, okay. And here what is that? It is just the exactly the reciprocal of that. So, I am writing that 1 upon E. Since demand curve is downward sloping in usual case, that del Q by del P is negative, right. So, elasticity value is negative always. So, if I write absolute elasticity value, this plus sign I can write without negative sign, minus, okay. So, basically that equals to MC. So, we are getting MR equals to price whole into 1 minus 1 upon E, E in a absolute value, right. Now, so when you are producing something, your MC is something positive, right, some marginal cost you are incurring, additional unit of the product what you are producing, okay, you are incurring more cost. So, marginal cost is something positive. So, to make that something positive in the left hand side, price though will be something positive, right. So, what elasticity value should be, okay. So, elasticity value will be in that case definitely greater than 1. If elasticity absolute value is greater than 1, then this will be a fraction, 1 minus that fraction will be another positive fraction, price into that positive fraction something positive left hand side, right hand side something positive. If elasticity is less than 1, then what will happen? 1 by elasticity, this component will be a greater than 1, 1 minus that component will be the negative thing, price into that negative, price is to something positive. So, price into that thing will be negative. So, your MR will be negative, MC will be positive, they can't be equal, okay. And if elasticity is exactly 1, that time this will be 1 by 1, 1 minus 1, this will be 0, it will be till price into 0, as if your MC equals to 0, unless your MC equals to 0, that kind of condition will not be satisfied. So, we can see that only satisfiable condition, only tolerable condition is that when your absolute value elasticity is always greater than 1, right. So, that is why we are telling that of course, monopoly will attain his equilibrium quantity choice or equilibrium altogether, both combination of quantity and price, that should fall on the elastic segment of his demand curve. And why that is the case? This equation is telling that. This equation is not there in your book, but the way we are discussing, none of you will be facing any difficulty to follow this thing, okay. Let us stop here. We will continue now in the next lecture, that what about the social welfare implication of monopoly and so on, okay. Let us stop here.